This episode is made possible by purchasing resources through the Creation Science for Kids store.
Welcome to the Creation Science
for Kids
show. Today is an extra special edition sharing about our experience visiting the Ark Encounter in Kentucky. We give you the lowdown on what it's like visiting with kids and even which day of the week is best for having room to run. And is there ever room to run on the Ark? Plus, we had an amazing chance to drop by the Answers in Genesis design studio, see them at work, and meet a real live giant. Praise the Lord. I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart. In the company of the upright, in the congregation. Great are the works of the Lord, studied by all who delight in them. Full of splendor and majesty is his work, and his righteousness endures forever. He has caused his wondrous works to be remembered. The Lord is gracious and merciful. Psalm 111, verses 1 through 4. This is episode 47 of the podcast where we learn about Jesus, our Creator, and his amazing world. Hi, I'm Sherry Fields, your host, and I'm joined today by my co-host. Hi, I'm Sherry Fields, your host, and I'm joined today by my co-hosts, Charity.
Hi.
Joseph.
Hi.
Timothy.
Hi.
Samuel.
Hi.
And Stephen.
Hi.
To follow along with what we're learning about, check out the show notes, creationscience4kids.com/Ark Encounter. So we're going to start with a verse before we dive in. This is going to be a pretty different episode because I don't have a bunch of topics that I had to research. We all experienced the research. But I wanted us to read this verse out of Hebrews 11, verse 7. Joseph, would you read it for us, please?
By faith, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith.
All right. We got to see what that verse is talking about, didn't we? Mm-hmm. Did we see how Noah prepared the ark and saved his house?
Yeah.
Yes. And did we see about the world that got condemned? It didn't have that much, but do you remember the section?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
And he became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. Okay, so let's start with what we got to do. So we were traveling from visiting family back home, and we were stopping in Lexington, Kentucky anyway. So when I realized it's not very far and right off the freeway to visit the Ark Encounter, I thought, well, let me see what they can do to help us because money's pretty tight. I wrote to Ark Encounter and I said, hey, I've got this podcast and some people are listening. Is there any way I can get media passes? And like a week later, I got word back saying, yes, we will give you 2 official professional media passes to use. Help pay. Charity is 13 now, so we use that for her, and then some Grandpa paid for the boys' tickets because that's the one thing that's really difficult about the Ark Encounter because they poured so much money into building the Ark itself and then they've got all kinds of plans in the work. The place is not cheap. It's less than half of going to Disneyland, about 2/3 of, well, I don't know, a little over half of what it costs to go to Legoland, but it is not like going to a local museum. It was pretty pricey. So that's the one thing that's kind of hard. But we were able to go. We got there as soon as it opened on a Monday morning, and that's one of the things I was talking to a lady who works there, and there are a bunch of people who work there, and they're very knowledgeable and super nice, of course. They said Mondays are the best day to visit. They tend to be the quietest, and then the rest of the week, even through the winter, so, well, they've only been open since July, so even here in the last week or two at the end of the year, they're still pretty busy, because by the time we left, there were, I don't know, probably 100 people wandering around, and that's on a school morning. So we got to park right up front because we were there as soon as actually before they opened, and they're still working on signs, which I would have said that was a problem, except when we got to the design studio, on the conference room where we got to stay to keep the kids from getting into stuff for part of the time, they had a whole bunch of signs, even one from Animal Kingdom, that were giving them ideas of how they could put up direction signs saying, go this way, head that direction. So I know that our confusion was just a temporary thing because they've only been open for 6 months. So once we found out where the right spot to get our tickets and get on the bus, then everything was fine. The buses are super cool. What did they have on them?
They had pandas.
Pandas, and it was all kinds of animals. And what was it like riding on? Have you ever ridden on a bus like that before?
Yes.
Yeah, they were like
normal, regular buses.
City buses, yeah. And they had plenty of room for strollers, and it was super easy. I just had one step to get the stroller up onto. And so for both strollers and handicap, the place was well laid out. They had where the back step on the bus could lower if you had somebody with an electric wheelchair or regular wheelchair to help them get on. So I thought that was awesome. Okay, then you get off the bus, and what did we see? We came around the corner, and we could see
the Ark.
The Ark, yes. And they had restrooms right there. That's for a family with kids. They had plenty of restrooms. It was lovely. So we were able to stop right there. And they had some pretty expensive, high-quality snacks like fresh squeezed lemonade, but that was like $5. So we skipped all those. And you can see there's still lots of dirt around, although the day we were there, they were laying out the grass cover for that pond that's right in front of the Ark has been just bare dirt since the Ark's been open, and they're starting to get that covered. It's starting to look better. We could see what was off on the side, and we didn't get to stop and see them because we didn't have time. Those wooden structures, what were those?
Zip lines.
Zip lines, yeah. And it looked like one of them went quite a ways over, and they had like a rope course where you could
Obstacle
go.
course.
Yeah, sort of obstacle course. So I'm pretty sure that's extra. I don't know how much extra, but that looked like a lot of fun, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. We saw the Camp Infinity where you can sluice to get fossils out of a bag of rocks. That it wasn't open when we were there, but it looks really nice. A little smaller than I imagined on the pictures, but that was there. And then we got to go inside. Now, we took pictures. They had a huge queue line like you were at an amusement park where you'd have to go back and forth, and looks like they have enough space for people to take about an hour to get through there. When we got there, it was totally empty, so we got to cut through that. And I asked, and there have been several days where they've had that queue all the way full. They have to limit the number of people inside the Ark at any given time. So then we went up the ramp, and what did we get to do first? Now we're inside the Ark. What was that like, going inside?
It was pretty cool. It was like you were walking under a boat that was about going to be put into the water.
Right.
They had these speakers that were playing, like it was raining.
Right, thunder and lightning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the queue waiting downstairs, it had kind of dramatic movie music. But yeah, it looked like a boat underneath as well. It wasn't just from the outside. It's only on the back side where they have all the restrooms and the elevator and stuff that it didn't look like a boat. Yeah, so what did we get to see first? Do you remember? Well, no, actually, we got to hear them. There were little mice squeaking and other. What were those first?
Rattlesnakes.
Well, we didn't get to see anything inside of them because they were small.
Oh, food bins.
Yeah, all the cages for the small animals, remember? What were they like? Can you tell them about it?
They were in boxes that you could not see.
Cardboard boxes?
Yeah.
Really?
Kind boxed in so they couldn't get around the place and mess everything up.
Right. The slats on the boxes were kind of cool. It looked like they were made out of bamboo or some other kind of reed so that it could let air through without the mice and things escaping. So they didn't have to have any models inside, just have the noises so you could hear them. But what else could you see?
They had jars.
Uh-huh.
And things you could put food in.
Yeah, a wooden
water.
box that you could pour kibbles and bits kind of, or grain and all that down into to feed the animals and then water them without having to touch them. Now, I pointed out underneath the boxes it had some wood that was sloped. What was that for?
For their droppings.
Right. So, and I actually asked at the design studio what were their ideas, because it just showed the slats and not what you would do with yucky mess that would fall out from under the animals. But they imagined them using like rakes and stuff to scrape that out if it didn't dry and crumble off. But they thought through, okay, how do you feed them and water them, and how do you get rid of the waste? And they had a pretty cool idea about that. Now, because it was so empty, right at first, what happened to us? We got to the end where we could see the end of the ark, and it just stopped. So we turned around and came back.
We thought that it was done.
Yeah, we couldn't figure out where to go next. Now, on a busy day, I'm sure other people would have looked just the right spot to realize it was a sort of maze. And so we went back to the lady who was showing people how to get started and said, okay, now where do we go? And she took us around the corner. It's like, oh, I missed that part. So that was kind of interesting. Okay, here's our pamphlet. So how many levels are inside the ark?
3.
3. Why?
Because how would they fit every single thing?
No. Why are there 3? Who told them 3?
God.
God did. Yeah, when you read about the ark. Oh, here. Okay, in Genesis chapter 6, God tells him how to make the ark. And he said, make it out of gopher wood. Now, that's one of the things I didn't ask at the design studio, but they used what kind of wood? Remember I told you? They had some extra logs out front showing how some people had given lots of money to help make the place, so they were being honored. Yeah, they used wood that had already died by itself. I forget from where at the moment. You can read about all this on Answers in Genesis. But trees that are growing today, of course. Gopher wood, that word gopher only appears right here and is probably, my guess, is that it was some kind of wood we don't have today. But, of course, Answers in Genesis couldn't use wood that's been extinct since the flood, could they?
No.
No. So they use regular wood. And he said, the length shall be 300 cubits, a window. Here we go. In verse 16. And the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof with lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it. That's why they have it in 3 levels, because that's what God told Noah to make. So after the little animals, how did we get to the next level?
We went up a ramp.
A ramp. The kids love the ramp, especially the little ones, because it was quiet. What did you guys get to do?
We gotta run.
Yeah, I let them run ahead because they weren't in anybody's way. So that's one thing about going when it's quiet. Another thing is they're working on redesigning. When you go up to the second deck, you go into where they had all those beautiful paintings of creation and Adam and Eve, and then how wicked everything got. And they said people tend to bunch up there because they're wanting to stop and read, but then they get a whole big line where people aren't walking. They're just stuck waiting behind those other people who are reading. So we didn't have to stop. And in fact, their diorama where they had models where they're actual little people, they had a wild party up on this platform with people with not enough clothes. So I even told the designer, sorry, we didn't appreciate it as much because I kind of let my kids run past it, so they didn't focus on it as much. Then we got to you guys' favorite part. What did they have on the upper deck that you could actually see inside the cages?
Oh, we got to go in a place where we could...
Before the kids area, what else? What did they have outside that you guys liked? Timothy?
The animals?
The animals. Now, were they alive?
No.
No. Most of the ones they had done are presumed extinct, they would say. So, was there one particular kind you liked most?
Yeah. It was the bat.
The bats? Yeah, now the bats are still alive. Yeah, those were really cool. And I like that they had a space for 300 bats, although they said it's quite possible that God only needed to bring 14 different pairs. So that'd be, how many? 14 twice is? 28 bats. But they went ahead and did 300 in case God brought more than just the absolute basics. Because one of the hardest things is to figure out just how many animals alive today do have a common ancestor and how many don't. Like I noticed they had a hyena kind as well as a dog kind. Although I missed seeing the dog, but they said at the design studio, they said, yeah, we had a dog kind and cat kind. Did you see them? It's like, No, where was it? Anyway, you like the bats. What kind did you like?
The giraffe kind.
The giraffe kind. Did it look like a giraffe you'd see at the zoo?
No.
No, what was different?
It had a short neck.
Uh-huh. And what about, did it have spots like a giraffe?
Yes.
It did? It's stripes too.
Mhm.
Because I was looking, because what they're saying is that most like the okapi, which is mostly brown, but it has stripes on the back legs, and the giraffe came from the same common ancestor. So they've given it stripes. All right. Now I liked, and I had to ask at the design studio, what was the name of that animal? Because Charity was my camera woman. I didn't have a way to catch the title they'd put on it. But this model animal looked like, a cat crossed with, I don't know, a bunny. It was really cute, small and furry, but with these like saber tooth things coming out of it. I'm going to try to get a picture, but it's called Thalacosmilus. And we got to meet the guy who modeled it, and they told us that was the first animal he designed. And I thought it was just super adorable. And I never heard of this animal before, so I'm going to have to do some more research. Hopefully I'll have something for you guys in the show notes. And at the end, they had a really cool video where it was like a mini movie about Noah and what was happening. Who were those other weird people?
They were... I'm forgetting.
Do you remember
Making
just
fun of them?
making fun of them? How? They were supposed to be from a newspaper, but they were dressed up like really weird motorcycle gang people. And one of the guys, what did he do? At the very end, the lady laughed because he had...
Drawn a silly picture.
He'd drawn a picture that looked like Picasso had made it. That was supposed to be Noah, and saying, "Oh, that's so realistic. That's how much he's like." But asking, "What are you doing building this crazy boat?" What I liked is just before those people came, that Noah's wife, and they call her Zara, and I've got to find out why, because I forgot to ask how. Is there a reason, or did you just pick those sounds? But oh, that's right. Yeah, Tim Chafee said they just came up with a nice sounding name. They just made it up out of whole cloth. It's not like Hebrew or anything. But Mzara walks up to Noah and says, "Don't forget, I want my rose plants." And he's like, "You really want them? I guess I'll do it for you." And I was like, "Yes, Noah's wife, I'm so glad you remember the rose plants. Otherwise, they might have gone extinct and we would never have gotten to smell them. And that would have been horrible, wouldn't it?"
No.
So it's kind of fun to think, okay, like I've always imagined that Noah probably brought seedless grapes along, because would those have survived and had seeds for us to eat today if there wasn't a gardener to take care of them? No, they're seedless. Their seeds don't grow. So you have to grow them from slips. You have to have a living plant to pass on. So that was just fun. And what was right past the movie area? You were going to say, Stephen? The dark and scary place. I thought the kids weren't going to like it. It was so dark in there. But what was it?
It was a awesome place. We could go in our own cage.
Right.
And I almost tripped.
So what was that area?
It was
an area designed for kids.
It was a kids area. Like at the Creation Museum, they had a little spot where it was all twisty and small, and there was one spot where only the kids were allowed to crawl in, and if you were on the outside, it looked like they were the animals inside the cages like all the other animals, which was really fun. But it was supposed to be what the animals do when Noah's not around, because it's nighttime, which is why it was dark and gloomy in there. So, what did you see? What were those silhouettes?
They had this scary lemurish creature.
Yeah.
Had glowing green eyes.
Right. At first, all you could see were eyes, and then it light up so it looked like something like a lemur. Yeah. And there was another one where it was a jar, and what was inside the jar?
Snakes.
Yeah, a snake. It was rather creepy, but my kids loved it, including my 2-year-old. She kept wanting to go back.
She liked the tunnel.
Yeah. And then right after that was my favorite bit in the whole arc itself. They had a room with Noah. What was Noah like? Was it just a painting?
No, it was an animation.
An animatronic. So it was a statue guy that could
move and blink and look around.
Right.
And talk.
Very realistic. He was cool. And he talked, but did he just say the same thing over and over?
No.
Why not?
You could ask questions.
How? You talked to him?
No, there was a little touch screen that you touched these questions, and he would talk to you.
Right. So it was kind of cool. It had the questions already loaded in. So you just tapped on the one you wanted to hear and he would start answering it. And that was pretty cool. Was there another character in the room?
Yeah. It was Noah's wife.
Yeah. I thought she was beautiful. And I told them at the design studio, I thought she was really, really pretty. What was she doing?
She was reading.
Yeah. Reading what?
A scroll?
Yeah. It was supposed to be a letter from her dad when they got engaged. Now, one of the things here, I picked up Tim Chafee and, oh boy, I left the book upstairs, and Kay Marie, and I can't remember her last name, have already written the first book of a Noah trilogy. What's extra cool about it is not only are they imagining the world before the flood and what it was like for Noah, but they get to include details that are in the Ark encounter. So I have the feeling that when I get further into the book, that letter will be part of the story. And in fact, at the back of the book, it says, here are Easter eggs that if you've read the book, watch for this when you go to the Ark encounter, which is pretty cool to have the guy in charge of design writing the book so that it's like reading a fiction book that gets turned into a movie. You get to see all those extra details in the real world, which was a lot of fun. Okay, and then we heard a bunch of hammering and pounding. And I thought at first it was going to be them showing building the ark, but what was it actually?
It was their workshop.
Right, what kind of workshop? They had two of them.
One was wood.
Woodworking? Uh-huh.
And one was metal.
Yeah, for what do we call that? Where you work with metal?
Blacksmithing.
Blacksmithing. Yeah, I would have liked to seen a little more of how they were thinking of them surviving with all the wave action, but they had a clay oven and that they would actually do blacksmithing to repair and make things that they realized they needed on the ark. That was a pretty amazing idea that I wouldn't have ever thought of.
We only have 7 cups.
Oh, very funny. Oh, yes. And then right after that was the most colorful room. Our 2-year-old thought it was a lot of fun because it was so cute. What was it?
It was the ark picture. You know, the arks that you don't really see, the little bathtub arks.
Right, the fairy tale arcs.
Their head out.
Yeah, and they had this cute little poem that its point was...
If Noah had actually built that bathtub ark, the first big wave, it would just go crash.
Right, and tipped over. Most of it in there was really adorable stuff, but what did they have on the side? There was that red... Snake that represents
Satan.
And what was he saying?
If I can convince you that the flood never happened, I can convince you that Jesus in heaven isn't real.
Yeah, I thought it was incredibly well done. At that point, you've been through half the ark, and it has a very homespun feel. It still smells like the wood, probably will for years because there's so much wood there. The one unrealistic thing about it is it does not smell like a zoo like outside, which was okay with me. But here you go from all this wood and all this hugeness and all this reality, and then you're in all this plastic cuteness, and it's like a slap in the face almost. It's like, what? People think this is what the ark was like? No, it was nothing like that. And of course, that's the point. I thought it was very effective. So kudos to them. Then the other section where they were imagining what kinds of things they would need to deal with. What would be the problems you'd have on a giant boat full of animals for a year?
Well, you have all this waste.
Yeah, so how to take care of the waste, and what do they have to show you that?
Screen that you can see.
Like a big screen TV?
So, they had a little table that it would tell you a little bit about it, and then it would say, place your hand here to see what they would do.
Yeah. Did you guys have trouble getting the hand thing to work? Okay.
It takes about
a little more
5 to 10 it takes about 5 to 10 seconds.
Okay, that would make sense.
Heat.
It was loading, but it just took, or you think our hands were too cold?
Probably.
No, we were in there for a long time. Our hands were not cold.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I think it was room temperature, but it took a while for your hand to get warmed up.
Something like that. But we always got it working eventually. And it showed all kinds of cool ideas. My favorite was to get airflow all the way through, because you've got 3 decks. So you have that open section where the ramp goes up and down, where you could see when we were on the first deck, you could see all the way out or to the ceiling. But how did they imagine that they could get air to flow all the way through?
The water would push the...
They imagined a sort of mechanism where the wave action itself would help force air down and through. I didn't catch all of how it is, but that's more engineering stuff. So they definitely had thought through this, how you could actually pull off living in a space like this, how to dump out the waste. And they had like a water wheel at the top. It was really fascinating stuff. So we climbed up the ramp to the next floor. And one of the things, they have restrooms on each deck. Nice big ones and a little industrial feeling. Except for where the ark itself was, it was more cement. It was kind of interesting. But they also have a nursing room in each of the ladies' room on each floor. So if you've got an infant, they've got a nice quiet space with a rocking chair. Not very pretty yet. I hope they add more soft touches as the years go by. They probably will. But it was very family friendly, which I thought was great. Okay, so then the first thing after the restrooms on the top deck, what did we get to? It was their living quarters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so what did they have? The different people were doing what?
Some people were in their rooms and...
Just sitting around?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was somebody sitting around?
There was like,
there-
I think Ham's wife was.
Okay,
She was
just
sitting on her bed, relaxing.
Right.
No, that was...
Ham was- okay. But I think Japheth and his wife, what were they doing? She was
in the kitchen.
Okay. Well, one of their wives. Yeah. Now, that was one of the things when you get there at the very first, after you've walked in and you see the little animal cages, they had where all the family is together praying and thanking God that they're surviving as they realize this flood is for real. Noah's praying in Hebrew, and everyone looks as pale as my family does, except for Ham's wife, who looks pretty dark. And when we went to the design studio, Mr. Chafee said he wished they were speaking English because we don't know what they were speaking, and it certainly wasn't modern Hebrew, because even in the past 4,000 years, Hebrew has changed a lot.
I thought he said that Noah was speaking a Noah language that they invented.
No, you could understand it. We had like Adonai and Elohim and stuff. So it was Hebrew, and he wished it was in English just because then you wouldn't have to worry about that. And whoever made the figures, when it came back, they were like, their skin color. But he said the amount of work to change it so Ham's wife wouldn't be quite as dark and the rest would be darker was so much work they haven't done it yet. I'm hoping they do because they've heard a lot of feedback saying that's not realistic, and they completely agree and wish it hadn't been that way either. So anyway, but one of the guy's sons was playing a flute, and his wife was painting a pot. And they had some paints. They were imagining, okay, so you're stuck on this for a year. You can't spend all your time just mucking out stalls. You need something to do. So they imagined them. One of the ladies, what was she doing in the next room?
Working in the kitchen?
Yeah, they had a kitchen with lots of vegetables and fruits. And one of my favorite things, this is what really blew my mind at the museum. What did they have across the way from the kitchen, right under those windows?
Oh, Noah and his wife.
Yeah, that was in the next room down. On the same side, but before you got to them, they had behind these nettings, do you remember? A garden.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because if you think about it, what happens to sailors who only get to eat dried, storable food on a long voyage? What do they get?
They get scurvy.
Scurvy. Noah and his family would have gotten scurvy too, unless they had some way to...
eat oranges.
Well, possibly. Or you know what else works? And I was thinking about this afterwards.
Cabbage.
Rose hips have a lot of... What is it that oranges help you with?
Vitamin C.
Vitamin C. Rose hips have a lot of vitamin C. So if Noah's wife really did have the roses in her garden, they could have eaten the hips and made tea and stuff out of it and gotten the vitamin C they needed to not have scurvy. But I really like that they show that they were growing fresh green things, because most likely they did. Because you think about the kinds of plants that, like wheat, that we had right away. As soon as you have farming, any sign of human habitation, you get certain plants and vegetables and things that people were growing. So most likely Noah and his family had brought that on the ark. I love that idea. Okay, and then what was special about Noah and his wife up there?
Noah was taking back the dove who had the olive branch in his mouth, and his wife was watching him.
Yeah. One of the things that they have is the idea that Noah's wife really liked birds. And so they had the birds right up top where they would have more light and where Noah and his wife could hear the birds from their bedroom tweeting and chirping and stuff. I love that idea.
That sounds cute.
Yeah.
I would like that too.
Yeah, and throughout the ark, they point out, hey, the Bible gives us such a small amount of information. We had to use a lot of artistic license to pull it into the real world. This is not Bible. This is our idea. You're welcome to think other things, but we thought this made sense and it's plausible. And I love that they pointed out because a couple of months back I had to do it.
We don't exactly know that this is what it looks like, but this is a good guess.
It could fit. Yeah, because a couple months back, I had to put in a bad review about a book that said, here is what most likely happened, as if it was fact, and sometimes just saying, this is how Noah did it. If you say, we know for sure, that's not right. But when you say, this is an idea that makes sense, that is perfectly fine, as long as you say, this is our best guess, because we don't have that kind of information. Okay, then up on top, you had... I'm trying to remember what was near the beginning. They had a making of the Ark film that we kind of skipped over because we watched a lot of that on Facebook and we were in a bit of a hurry. What was before the flood? Oh, yes. They had the Ice Age. So what the climate would have been like right after.
What man made?
Fossils. They had the fossils right there. Remember? They had real ones. What was your favorite one?
The trilobite.
Yeah, they were a lot bigger than our little bitty trilobite, weren't they? Mm-hmm. And there was a big shell, and it was a...
Oh, it was a ammonite?
I think they had an ammonite, and they had a scallop shell. It was a beautiful scallop shell fossil. Yeah, so that was fun. They had some real fossils, which that's always my favorite. And then they had the Ice Age. So they had some
man-made? What man-made?
Man-made.
Like all the machines and the evolution versus creationist.
Yeah.
I remember the Bibles.
Yeah, we're getting to that. We're working our way down.
Look at your trilobite.
Not right now. Okay, so all the ideas of uniformitarianism, the big picture apologetic stuff was at the top. Then they had the flood legend room. Now that was pretty cool because did you see that big map on the back wall?
Yeah, that was fun.
So what part of the world remembers that there was a flood?
Every single part?
Every single part. But did they remember the boat the way God described in the Bible? No, what was...
They remembered it was a boat, but they didn't remember
Right, so what kind of shapes did they have?
Mommy, they had a canoe.
Right, a big
canoe. They had
canoe.
like a flat. It was like a dock with a box on it. And then around...
yeah, do you remember what the shape...
Like half circle...
Yeah, what do you call that shape boat where it looks like a half circle?
A house?
A coracle. If you remember in Narnia, Reepicheep has a coracle at the end of Voyage of the Dawn Treader. But yeah, it's shaped like a bowl.
And then they had a cube.
Yeah, that's a Gilgamesh epic. So the Babylonians. And then they had on the wall, what was
a movie about all the different arcs.
So they showed them floating along nicely, and then what happened?
So the canoe one, it's like floating along nicely, then this big wave comes, and everyone falls out.
Yeah. And then the coracle one?
No survivors. It's floating along nicely, goes over a couple big ones, then a really big one comes, and it flips over.
And the movie says...
No survivors.
Yeah, and then the box one.
No, wait. You're missing one. The flat one.
The deck one. The deck one.
Then it got swallowed by the waves.
Right, the waves knocked it down. The box one I thought was the funniest. What happened?
So it was floating along nicely and nothing tipped over. Then it was on the outside, but then they showed the inside, and everyone was getting flung around.
Right, it was gives you such a rough ride that everybody would have been smashed to a pulp inside, even though they didn't drown. And then they showed the dimensions God gave us, and
it fit perfectly.
It actually works. It is seaworthy. Those dimensions are good dimensions for a ship that needs to be stable, but doesn't have to go anywhere much. It's the most stable shape for a ship. Yeah. Okay, so then there was one last exhibit. They're working on some more at the aft end of the top deck, but it wasn't open yet.
The Bibles, the Museum of Bibles.
What was special? What was cool about that Bible museum?
Well, they had Bibles from everywhere. They even had a Hebrew Torah scroll.
Right, they had some scrolls, and was it printed last year?
No, it was real.
Yeah?
That from Jerusalem.
No, not that old. No, that would have been cool. But no, it was like from the 1800s. They did have some Bibles that the oldest one I saw was from the 1100s. What kind of people were wandering around in Europe in the 1100s? I'm told you, boys.
Europeans.
Yes. What kind of people did they have? Where were people living? And what were they wearing? In the 1100s.
Knights.
European knights. Yes. Well, the knights were wandering from castle to castle and fighting for their kings. That book was written. And it had a painting of Jesus getting baptized, but Jesus didn't have any clothes on and he was dreadful skinny. But then they had some missionary stuff.
They had, what's his name? The guy in China.
Yeah.
William Carey.
No. He went to India.
Hudson
Taylor.
Chair.
They had real stuff from Hudson Taylor. Yes, his chair. That was super cool to see the real deal. And I had thought...
In the South America, they told about this chief who was a witch doctor, and he had spirits in him, and then the people from England came, and he became a Christian. Basically, when the chief becomes a Christian, everyone else becomes a Christian.
Right, yeah, that's extra cool when that happens. Yeah, so that was a pretty cool exhibit about the power of the Bible. Oh, I had thought that was a temporary exhibit that was going to be moved to Washington, D.C. when the Museum of the Bible opens, but it turns out it's on permanent loan from the Bible Museum that Answers in Genesis gets to use those. So I thought it was cool they'd set that up in the Ark. So then we got to go down all those ramps again, and what was down at the very bottom?
A gift shop!
Yes, and I thought it was going to be like the bookshop at the museum where it was almost all books with a few toys. But it actually was full mostly of fair trade items. Like if you want one of those African shopping baskets, they had that. They had Christmas ornaments. What did you guys get?
We got stuffy. I got a stuffed bat.
Yeah, and got a little panda and a red panda. Got t-shirts. And when we were there, my favorite design was only available in one size that didn't fit me. But they had a nice selection. Some of theirs are really pretty. Then they did have a bookstore. That's where I bought Tim Chafee's book and got it signed by him. I think with how long this podcast is getting, we're going to have to leave the design studio, the rest of it, for next episode.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be okay. But anyway, we went outside for a few minutes before we had to head north. And they had the zoo, which that smelled right, like animals. There was a brand new baby zebra, but I couldn't get a picture because the sun was behind where we could see. And then when we tried going around the other side, there were fences in the way. Was it a real tiny zebra?
Yeah.
Not really. I was thinking...
Well, compared to a giraffe, it's tiny.
Yes, but compared to his mother, it was pretty big for a 3-day-old. It's like, oof, that would have been a lot of work to get out. And what else do they have? What was your favorite, Joseph?
Kangaroos.
They had kangaroos. They have camel rides, which is extra money. They had llamas. Oh, ostriches and emus.
Yeah.
And they're expanding it soon. There was lots of construction. Not too obtrusive, but you could tell that there's going to be so much more down the road.
Did you tell about what they're planning on doing?
Which one?
They're going to build a zoo, a theme park.
Yeah.
And
they've got
Tower of Babel.
Mm-hmm. They had one other thing finished. What was that? Mzara's Kitchen.
Oh, yes.
Which Mzara is what they decided to name Noah's wife. They said at the design studio that they'd gotten tired of calling them Mrs. Noah, Mrs. Shem, Mrs. Ham, and decided to give them all names. So we just peeked in to see what their prices were like, and the food smelled amazing because we had to head north as quickly as possible. But I had a look at their menu, and their prices were pretty decent. All the food that I saw was under $10. So if you have the time and the money to eat at a restaurant, it looked like a lot of fun, and it definitely smelled good. At that point, we just headed out.
Yeah.
Got to ride on the bus again. And Yeah, that's something else. Hopefully they'll have a few more signs getting out. It's super easy to get to. The freeway has a sign saying this exit for the Ark Encounter. It had a sign when you get off saying turn left here. And they've got that big old gate entry way off the road. And it had a lot of the same feel of the other amusement parks that we've been to where it's laid out to handle traffic. So I was highly impressed. It was everything that I had hoped it would be, that I had been led to expect from what they put up on Facebook and all. It's going to be super exciting to see what they get done over the next few years, as they've got some pretty exciting plans, including something that we got to see, and we'll tell you about next time, that they're working on at the design studio, because that's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Terrifying too, but amazing. Well, I think we're going to have to wrap up for today. So if you want to see, we'll put up some pictures. I'll have more pictures on my Facebook group. So if you come to Creation Science for Kids at Facebook and send me a message and say, hey, I would like it on the group, you'll be able to see all the pictures that I post, and I'll have some in the show notes, which is at creationscience4kids.com/Ark Encounter, or just /047 for episode 47. And when you go to the show notes or anywhere else on my website, if you could let your friends know for us, I love what we're doing, and it was so amazing that because you guys listen, we were able to get help, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to go this trip. So thank you guys so much. And if you think this is a lot of fun and helpful, please let your friends know for us what we're up to, because you have amazing power to help your friends find the truth about the Bible, about our history, our family, and what other people are doing with just a click of a button.
Plus, if you want to encourage us, leaving us the show a rating on iTunes is a great way to do that and help families looking for new podcasts to find us. Thanks!
And if you haven't signed up for my weekly email, I do more than just my podcast. Every week I run into new resources, things that are happening in the creation science world, and just apologetics to help us train our kids to face an ever darker world. And I send out an email newsletter. So if you would like to get that, you can sign up anywhere on my website. It has a form you can fill out so you can become a part of our community and never miss the thing that I'm doing online.
Do you like science? Got a subject you want to learn about? Or maybe you like telling stories.
Remember, it's super easy to turn your smartphone into a recorder, as you'll see I do next time. And if you send me a report, story, joke, or interesting idea, I might use it in a future show. Head over to creationscience4kids.com/podcast to find out what to do.
Well, this finishes up our show for today. Until next time, have fun treasuring our amazing universe and Creator.
Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. Revelation 4:11.